Welcome to Sacred Spills, where we endeavor to explore the eternal in the ordinary. First of all, let me just say, I just recorded something and there was no sound. So frustrating. So this is still new for me. It's been exciting to learn, but there are some really challenging and frustrating things that happen along the way. So I don't know why, for whatever reason, there was no sound in the last recording, but I had to re-record. So that just happened. I also want to just get a little shout out for friends and family who have given me some encouragement and some pointers along the way. I really do appreciate it. You may have noticed that I'm trying to change some of my taglines and my intros and stuff. That's from feedback from my friends, and I appreciate the pointers, and I'm trying to figure it out. I know that trying to be authentic in myself and out there, but I know that it doesn't always resonate or people don't always understand what I'm trying to communicate. So I really do appreciate feedback from others and hearing what other people have to say about what I'm talking about. While I'm continuing these chapters from With Christ in the School of Prayer by Andrew Murray, I want to throw out some additional stuff, some particularly spiritual formation types of things. I talked about it a little bit recently, but I'm not sure exactly how long they are or what's going to happen, but I'm pretty excited about creating a schedule and talking about certain things that have helped me in my Christian walk as I've been maturing. I have this really exciting idea that I'd like to share. It's from this book, The Healing Power of Stories. And I'm not going to go through the book specifically the way I have. This book was the most foundationally transformative in my Christian walk. I'm really excited to share some of that with everyone. I hope it can be helpful for people that are trying to figure out how to live life in this crazy, chaotic world. So that's what I would like to talk about, but I don't want to bring up too much of that in here, just to say the kind of elements of storytelling that pull us in can be used by God to bring us to closer expressions of who he is. And that's really exciting for me. It opened up whole new avenues of understanding fiction and literature and movies and seeing something beautiful like a work of art and how it can impact the human heart and soul in these strong ways. Being willing and open to accepting these inputs as long as I had the ability to gauge them and weigh them against scripture and to know if what it is that I'm engaging with is beneficial or not. So that was a really exciting moment for me in my life. And I hope to share some of that. But for now, we're going to continue with Christ in the School of Prayer. I made the commitment to go through all 31 lessons, and it's been really good. The title for the 10th lesson is What Wilt Thou? Prayer must be definite. I don't know why I want to say defiant every time I see that word, but prayer must be definite. And Jesus answered him and said, What wilt thou that I should do unto thee? Mark 10:51, Luke 18:41. So as a disclaimer, I want to talk about the idea that God is God and we're not God. We can do all these things and study about prayer and take this deep dive into what prayer is and how we present ourselves in prayer. But at the end of the day, it's up to him and how he is going to engage with us and our world. The theories that I'm talking about inform how we pray and help us to clean up our life, to anticipate encounter with the Holy Spirit, and to anticipate the answer to our prayers. But they're just theories. These are things that we should be doing regularly and repeatedly for ourselves and for our own lives. But we need to be very cautious about how we explain these things to other people. If we think we have the right formula or the right way to do something, we are still not that person and we're not engaging with God in that situation. And so we can be helpful and we might have pointers and ideas, but I think a lot of people have been hurt over the years by individuals who maybe prayed for somebody or asked somebody or told them to pray for some situation And the answer to the prayer wasn't what we expected it to be. In particular, when people are praying for someone's physical healing and it doesn't come the way we anticipated, and maybe they suffer for a long time, or perhaps they wind up dying from that illness, there's this tendency to say, oh, well, your faith wasn't strong enough, or you didn't do it the right way, or you didn't use the formula the way it was supposed to be done. And honestly, it's God's will, and He has timing for each of us. I don't think God is ever surprised by somebody dying or their death or even their illness. It's not like He's up there in heaven's like, poof, what are you doing here? You're supposed to still be down on earth. The people around you didn't pray good enough, or something. And we really do need to be careful, because I know several people that were really hurt by those kind of negative thoughts around prayer and towards prayer. I don't want to say that necessarily that is completely untrue, but it is really not helpful in any way. Even if there is some aspect of that is true, overall, God is God. He's in control. He's not afraid of our actions or attitudes. He's not surprised by what we do. And we can't push shortcomings in our theology onto other people as if it's their fault. So taking this deep dive into the different ways of praying and how to pray and how to prepare our lives for prayer, I want to make that clear that it's supposed to be an encouragement. It's supposed to be a journey for you to clean house, be more effective and effectual in your own prayers. For me, I am searching this. I want to have more connection with God, but I also would like to see more answers to my prayers that are specific. And so this is what led me down this journey of this particular book, knowing that this is a highly recommended book and it's well liked in many Christian circles. It's considered a classic, but I think it's easy to think the time we spend with theology and getting our thoughts correct is directly impacting things that maybe are more intuitive or more up for interpretation or have a lot more inputs than the amount of minutes you spend thinking about something or another. So that being said, please be mindful of thoughts, ideas, and attitudes that might be negative towards others. We want to try and be encouraging. I know I've been working on being more of an exhorter in my own life. For some reason, giving compliments is not as easy as it should be, and I want to be better at that. So yeah, correction is less necessary, and exhortation is definitely something we could all use a little bit more of in our lives. Right. So in this chapter, or in this lesson, Jesus asks the blind man, what do you want me to do for you? That's the NIV version. Old King James says, what wilt thou that I should do unto thee? So it's a little bit, an older expression. It's a little bit harder to understand for modern ears. But in NIV, it says, what do you want me to do for you? The way I first see that is, for my own sake, I need to clarify what it is that I'm actually asking of God. I tend to make these very vague, broad statements, but having something very specific takes a little more effort on my part to figure out what it is that I actually want. I could say, I want to be healthier, which is nice, and maybe it'll help in my life. But if I'm having pain in my knee, which is something that I struggle with, I want to ask specifically for God to restore my knee and to help me to not feel pain so it won't slow me down when I'm exercising. Or maybe something more specific with my eating patterns. Lord, help me to eat less sugar in my diet, or something like this, a little more specific, something more measurable, preferably, but definitely clarifying what is it that's making me unhealthy, and what is it that I could pray for more specifically that would help me to be healthier. So the clarifying and then understanding for myself. I need to understand the situation before I can really pray for what it is that's actually needed or necessary. And I know that God hears our heart and our petitions. And even if we ask for things in these vague ways, he hears our heart. He hears our desire behind it. It's not like you did it wrong and you didn't get an answer, so you're bad. That's not what I'm trying to get at. It's about being more specific and then aiming properly. He gives this great little story about the Boer Wars. These took place during his lifetime. And it's such a small thing historically that I don't think it's on the radar of most of my contemporaries in 2025. I don't know how many people know very much about the Boer Wars. I'm not really sure how many people even knew that they happened. But the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, there were a series of wars between the British colonialists and the Dutch settlers of South Africa that were called the Boer Wars. So they were, both European descent, but the Boers had been there for a lot longer, and the British wind up taking over the Dutch colony, and they have these series of wars. So the Boers use guerrilla warfare, and it's funny that he should say it takes everybody by surprise. I mean, I would think the British should have learned from previous engagements that guerrilla warfare does really work, and it's something to be aware of in battle. So he talks about the, European battle lines. They would line up and they would spray bullets into each other. And this is one of the reasons why there's just so much devastation in the Civil War in the United States, as well as the mass slaughtering during World War I, where they have this old style of lining up, facing each other in these battle lines, these battle formations, spraying bullets into the crowd. So when both sides are standing there in a pile, spraying bullets into the crowd, then both sides are taking tremendous losses. But if one side decides they're not going to fight that way, like the Boers did in this particular engagement, then the battle is fought completely differently. So each individual aiming at the thing that they want to shoot and then trying to make sure that they hit the target, they hit their man. So he's trying to get to that point. If to sin is to miss the mark, what is it that you're actually aiming at? You have to know what you're aiming at to know if you hit the target or not. So being able to understand what it is that you're praying for and being very specific in your prayers helps you to aim properly toward the thing that will actually be helpful. We talked in previous episodes as well about putting God on the hook, right? If you ask for something very specific, you will know if you got it or not. And then, of course, we want to see that our prayers are answered. It's encouraging. It builds our faith. I've often heard how hearing other people's testimonies is actually hope building. You're building in the hope and the expectation. If this happened for somebody else and it worked for them, then maybe it can work for me. This is when representation matters too. So you could see somebody who's so different than you or has such a different perspective about things and not take that as something that's applicable to your own life. So if you see somebody that you can relate to or someone that you think is comparable to your own self, having connection with God and growing in their faith, then you become more hopeful that if I do similar things and I reach out to God and I try to connect with him, then it's possible that he can reach out to me. I was talking to a friend very recently, and she works with Alcoholics Anonymous a lot. And as a believer in the AA program, working with individuals, this is something that's very helpful for addicts. If you see somebody who is able to overcome their addictions and you relate to them and you connect with them, then you're hopeful that maybe you can overcome your addictions or grow in your spiritual life because they grew. And so then I can grow. You're hopeful. It doesn't seem so distant and far away. We live in a very tangible material world, and these spiritual and ethereal things can seem so distant and so far away. So having an individual to look at and to touch and to get to know have these things happen in their life, that can be very encouraging for us. Sharing, when we have a specific prayer answered, if we share those things with others, it can grow their hope and their faith. They can step out and ask for new things. In us, too, when we pray for something and God answers it, we get encouraged to try and ask for the next thing. This is how He leads us, teaches us to pray. If He answers in small ways, then we are more hopeful that He can answer in larger ways. I hope some of that makes sense. I don't want to get too distracted down these rabbit holes, but having Jesus ask the blind man who very clearly needed to have his sight restored. But Jesus asked him, "What do you want from me?" And anyone could have guessed he wants his sight back. Jesus wanted him to say it. He wanted to have that engagement. He wanted to have that relational aspect with this blind man. He pulls it out of him. Listen, I can make assumptions here. We can all guess at what you want. For your benefit, you need to speak it out. You need to connect with me. You need to reach out to me in more specific way instead of just help me, help me, help me. This is important. This is what I'm teaching you, in a sense, what he's saying. On the bottom of page 57, Andrew Murray has a series of questions. I would like to read those questions. What is now really my desire? Do I desire it in faith, expecting to receive? Am I now ready to place and leave it in the Father's bosom? Is it a settled thing between God and me that I am to have the answer? We should learn so to pray that God would see and we would know what we really expect. I like this series of questions. I feel like they're a great way for us to recognize how we're asking God for things and if we're really believing them. I don't know about you, but I make these prayers and petitions, and some of them are very repetitive, and sometimes there's something that I check off a list or something that I say so often that it's almost becomes meaningless. So am I really asking with the expectation that God is going to take care of all my needs? Am I really willing to leave those things with God? Recently in my prayer time, I've realized that I have a fear of not having enough, which is so eye-opening to me because I've always had enough and, tied up with the love of money and the wanting of acquiring more money. And I feel like it's kind of gross, but I know that it really is. It has to do with my heart and how I'm trusting or not trusting God. So this kind of thought, am I really ready to place it and leave it in the Father's bosom? Like I come and I pray for needs to be met. Am I really ready to relinquish that and know that regardless of what comes, He's got me. He's got me. He's not going to let me go. He's not going to let me beg bread. He's not going to let me starve. I mean, a lot of systems would have to fail before I would go hungry. As a matter of fact, as I was talking earlier, I need to be more mindful of my health. So the overeating is more of an issue than the lack of food. We can maybe talk about the quality of the food as well. But not having enough is not really my problem and really hasn't ever been my problem. So it's this hoarding spirit, this need to rely on something external other than God. And it has become an idol in my life. And so how do I make sure to release that to God regularly? Having a set of questions like this is helping me to see my own sin nature and the shortcomings in my life and just want more connection with God, and I want to be more reliant on Him regardless of my external circumstances. This set of questions leads right into this different ways of writing a letter. So he talks about writing a letter, which It's kind of passe. It's always nice to get some snail mail from somebody. It's sweet to get a card, a handwritten card or something from someone, but it's a little bit passe. We have better ways of communicating now. And he talks about the difference between writing a letter for information and to share, because you're sharing your life with somebody else. I remember reading The Little House on the Prairie books with my kids when they were little, and there was this family letter that they would send around in the different family members, and they would add their little bit on the end. And I guess whoever originated from, mom and dad, would send the letter, and it would go from one family member to the other, to the other, to the other, and get all the way back around. And then you would see everybody's what's going on in their life. And it would take several months probably, but at least they had some type of connection, and the letter would just rotate and rotate and rotate so that everyone would hear what's happening in each other's lives. And this wasn't correspondence that would go back and forth. If one of the siblings wanted something or wanted to connect more specifically with a family member, or happened to have some business dealings with a different sibling or in a different area, they would actually write a very different letter. So I thought that was interesting. We actually use different platforms. So we're not using these letters, but there's a difference between having like a family group text where we're all sharing funny little anecdotes and just trying to communicate with each other in little ways. And then the group chat of, family business. Where are we going for this holiday? What are we doing for this vacation? Are we getting together for such and such a thing? What are we going to do for so and so's birthday? Or something like this that are more logistical. And you might not have all the same people in that group chat that's more logistical. I know I wouldn't put my children in a group chat that's more logistical, but I do expect and anticipate a response from those in the chat about what it is the business at hand that we're doing together. The next part of this chapter, he talks a bit about the sanctification of the will. And I think that's really interesting. We have agency. We have the ability to frame and structure our life, at least in limited ways. We are held accountable for the choices that we make, obviously, but how Adam and Eve willfully chose to do the thing that was defiant. The whole reason why Jesus came is to restore and sanctify that will. I think it's important personally for each of us to spend the time and make sure that what we're asking for is what God actually has for us. Our heart motivation and our desire is correct. It's not for selfish reasons. Like I talked about a little earlier, having this hoarding mentality. If I pray for more money or more stability or more resources, but it's just so that I could feel more secure, yeah, God might answer those prayers, and He is such a good and faithful God. The problem is that it actually may be pushing me away from God and making me more willfully independent from Him instead of dependent on Him. So my prayer may actually be working against the sanctification process for my heart. And I think that's pretty deep, but also very important and necessary, that we should look to make our hearts and minds aligned with the good and pleasing will of God. In this section, or just before that part, he talks a little bit about being in a place to be able to use these resources. And I want to get into that a smidge. I'm listening to Jamie Winship's book. I think I mentioned that too. I encountered some of his interviews online. But one thing he said in the book was, if you believe that God is leading you in these areas, what have you done to put yourself in the position that you may be influential in that area. I think that's really a good thing. Like, he wanted to help people and he felt called to be a police officer. And he tried to make sure during his time as a police officer that he was serving and protecting, not just enforcing and bringing justice. That serving and protecting is actually the first call of a police officer. And how can I serve and protect those that have a need in their life? I think that's a really cool thing. It's something that was not on my radar. I prayed for years, God to give me direction, to be with me, to show me, to guide me. And I would often have these vague prayers and just leave it to God to say, well, he'll work it out in the end. But I'm recognizing, asking God more specifically to reveal what it is that he made me for, what it is that I was intended to do, and then to help me to walk out in those ways and to be involved in areas that I could be influential. And now it's never a bad thing for me to pray for something like the end of human trafficking. But if I felt very compelled to be that this is a tremendous evil that needs to be stopped in the earth, who am I talking to? How am I connecting with people? What field or vocation should I be pursuing in order to be a person that would help to end the human trafficking trade? And that's something that's very specific, and I think most of us can agree is a negative in the world and it should be stopped. So yeah, keep praying for these things and talking to God about these things, but asking more specifically, how can I help and what ways will I be able to position myself so that I can be more influential in this area? And that should help me to be less selfish in what I'm asking. So how can I actually help and what ways? So I'm kind of just trailing off here, but to end this, there's a lot of themes that are overlapping, somewhat similar. There's only so many scriptures about prayer, but I do love how Jesus, looked at these blind men in these various particular instances when he healed blind people and asked them, what is it that you want, or what is it that I can do for you? And he specifically engages with them and they have to verbalize this. So in these specific instances, I think a principle is being shown that when we ask more specifically for our specific prayers, then we're more likely to get more specific answers to the specific needs, right? So I hope you find that helpful. And for next Thursday, please join me in our next lesson as we talk through believing that ye have received, or the faith that takes. That's the title. I hope you enjoy pursuing God with me, and I hope that you remain teachable to him so that you may grow in your knowledge and understanding of Christ. May we always abide in his goodness. Thank you.